First of all, hello everyone. I'm very excited, feeling privileged to be here with all of you, and I thank everyone for coming out to hear about our passion of light painting, and thank you to August for setting the whole thing up. What I'm going to do first and foremost is basically describe what light painting is, and then give you a very brief history of the light painting art form and how it has progressed to what you're going to see tonight. What is light painting? Light painting can be defined as the manual movement of light in a three-dimensional space over time during a long exposure photograph. I think that light painting is its own art form separate from photography. I often hear people call light painting a photographic technique, but again, I believe it's its own art form. The camera is simply the instrument that we use to record the light painting movement. So if you think of it like a traditional painting with oils or acrylics, okay? The act of painting is the art form. The canvas is simply the instrument that's used to capture the art form. It's the same thing with light painting. Our cameras that we're using, long exposure, are simply the instruments that we're using to capture the light painting art form. The light painting breaks down into three basic categories. So there's light drawing. That is where the light source is seen by the camera. So if you all were my camera facing me, you would be seeing this light source, and the traces of light would be left behind in the image during the long exposure. The next is light painting. That is where the projected light, so you're not seeing the light source, but you're going to see the projected light recorded in the image. And then third is kinetic light painting, where the lights in the scene would stay stationary, but the camera itself is moved to create the color and design within the frame. The common denominator of all three of these things is that they're all captured using the photographic technique of long exposure photography. Light drawing or light painting began as a scientific endeavor to study motion. The first known light drawings were created by Etienne Jules Marais and George Dominy in 1889. They created this image here called Pathological Walk from in Front. What they did, they just took small incandescent lights, attached them to the joints of one of their lab assistants, and had them move in front of the camera. Next up is work simplification studies with Frank and Lynne and Gilbreth. These were done in 1914, and these were to find more efficient workflows. So what they did was they took lights, attached them to the hands of factory workers, and traced the motion to try to find a more efficient workflow. In 1935, Man Ray is really the first one to use light drawing as an art form, or explore it as an art form. He did this series called Space Writings. And as you can see, it looks just kind of like random squiggles of light. And it wasn't until 2009, Alan Carey flipped the image, the photographer, and flipped the image and found Man Ray was actually writing out his own signature in light. One of the things with light writing, as you'll see in the demonstration, is you actually have to write backwards. If you want to keep the image straight out of the camera, you'll write backwards, but Man Ray was not. He was writing as you would normally write. So you have to flip the image to see his signature. In 1940, John Mili worked for Life magazine, and he did these series of figure skaters where he attached lights to their ankles, and they would skate around in the dark and leave these traces of light. Well, a few years later, he went on assignment to photograph Pablo Picasso for Life magazine, and he brought this image along with him and showed it to Picasso. And as the story goes, Picasso was immediately inspired and began to do his own light drawings. So John Mili showed Picasso this technique, took these photos, and this, has anyone seen this image before? Picasso draws the centaur, show of hands. If you search light painting online, this is probably one of the first images that you'll find. It's probably one of the most famous light painting or light drawing images because of the Picasso being attached to it, but that is Pablo Picasso. The first kinetic light painting, this is done by David Potts. This is Piccadilly Circus. It's a famous kind of town center in London. And what he did here was just long exposure and rotated his camera 360 degrees. Next up in 1976, we have Eric Stoller doing a series of what he called light drawings. This is his first one called Walker Street. Simply took a sparkler, attached it to a stick, and walked down the street during a long exposure photograph. This is the first one he created, and then he went on to do things like this, which is light tunnel. Anybody guess how this is done? No. The sparkler on a stick, and he's walking down the middle of the street, going back and forth like that during one long exposure. This is another one of Eric Stoller's called Poseidon, and this is simply lights around a Poseidon sculpture that he then laid flat and left those traces of light. So everything up to this point I would call light drawing. Again, light drawing, the light source being seen by the camera. The next step in this is the evolution or the birth of light painting. And light painting was really, I call Dean Chamberlain the father of light painting. In 1977, this is the first light painting that Dean Chamberlain ever created called Polyethylene Bag on Chase Lounge. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Dean many, many times. He's told me the story several times about how he feels, or he felt as though he was at Rochester Institute of Technology studying photography. He felt as though everybody was blowing him away in his photography courses. So he decided one night to go down into a dark studio with nothing but a flashlight to see what he could create. And this is what he came up with. Dean Chamberlain, again, father of light painting, and he has a knowledge of light painting unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. It's, again, I liken it to, a parent that knows their child. It really is truly something I think that he discovered and took it down a very interesting path. He did a series called Psychedelic Pioneers. It's one that's done with Timothy Leary. Again, all of his using that projected light in the scene to create very vivid images. He even won an MTV Music Award for a video he did with Duran Duran, all done with light painting. And then if Dean is the father, most certainly Vicky Da Silva would be considered the mother of modern day light painting. And this is her first light graffiti that she did in 1980 called Cash. She's also known for these very elaborate kind of, they're almost like a installation work because these are actually tracks that she lays down and then draws light through them. She also does long landscape light painting, very beautiful stuff. And finally, this is her last I'm going to show you here. She's really well known for her politically charged light graffiti. So if you look her up, you'll see some very interesting things. So that was a very brief history of light painting. Again, there's many, many, many artists that should have been included in here, but for time's sake, I gave you the basics. If you want to learn more, you can look at lightpaintingphotography.com. All right.